We now turn our attention to Canada, where the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his intention to resign, and that could pave the way for a diplomatic reset with India. After facing loss of support from key allies within his party and declining approval ratings, Trudeau announced that he will resign as party leader and Prime Minister. But he will stay on as the Prime Minister until the Liberal Party chooses a new leader last night. From New Delhi's perspective, Trudeau's time was up, with opinion polls showing he would have possibly lost the elections after being in office for 10 years. He became the Liberal Party's leader in 2013, Prime Minister in 2015. And while Trudeau's legacy will go down as the Prime Minister who destroyed the India-Canada ties, it appears a leadership race is underway within the Liberal Party. Before we dig into how a new regime at Ottawa will impact ties with New Delhi, take a look at this report that tells you who's in the running to be the next Prime Minister of Canada.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
As the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister made the biggest announcement of his career, pages from his speech blew away. Emblematic of the political blows he's faced in the recent month. Canadian politics has now stepped out of the Trudeau era, with the PM's big decision to step down hardly coming as a surprise.
Why didn't you do it earlier?
Trudeau's departure from the role comes at a particularly sensitive time as far as the India-Canada ties are concerned. The relationship has hit a historic low after Trudeau accused New Delhi of being involved in the killing of terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Ottawa has not furnished any concrete proof in the case, prompting India to repeatedly refute its claims. Foreign policy experts are saying Trudeau's resignation may provide an opportunity to stabilize a free-falling India-Canada relationship, as India has directly blamed Trudeau for the deep tension. So who's next in line to be at the helm of affairs in Canada? The Parliament will pause until March to allow the party to find a new leader, and several big names are in the mix. Former Bank of England and Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has already thrown his hat in the ring. He seems to have favourable views of India, as he has said that New Delhi is central to global climate action. There is Chrystia Freeland, who recently resigned as the Finance Minister. She's been quoted as saying that Canada's foreign policy supports a strong and united India. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who's walked in lockstep with Trudeau, is one of the top contenders for the post. If she climbs to the top, it would be interesting to see whether her views change. India Origin Transport Minister Anita Anand is also likely to put up a good fight. On the other hand is the Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre. It's been topping the popularity charts for a while now, opening a 24-point lead over the Liberals in the lead-up to a federal election. It's made Poilievre one of the strongest contenders for the Prime Minister's post. Poilievre has been quite vocal in his criticism of Trudeau's handling of the Canada-India dispute. He said if he were to become the Prime Minister, he would seek to restore a professional relationship with the Indian government, acknowledging India's importance as the largest democracy on earth. Canada is the only Western state that's seen worsening ties with India in recent years, something the incoming leader would like to change. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, let's now turn our attention to the big questions that we are posing on this debate. First question, will immigration and visa curbs be lifted now that Justin Trudeau is out? The next question that we are asking, and we're going to put that to our guests as well, that which of Trudeau's successors is likely to be most beneficial to India? We pointed out about half a dozen of those who are in the fray, but who's likely to be best from India's point of view? The third key question that we are asking is that is it now time, or will one see that instead of a very conflict-oriented approach, in the case of Nijjar's investigation and probe, it will now to be cooperation that will actually now take place. And let's get in Terry Milewski, who's joining us from Ottawa, and we have Brahma Chellaney, strategic affairs expert, joining us from Delhi. Terry, let me start by asking you the first question, which is that some of those who are in the fray, we've pointed out, we've told our viewers who are those going to be. Talk to us about, from an India-Canada relationship point of view, which of these contenders could actually be best positioned to repair the damage that's been done to the relationship under Justin Trudeau's tenure?
The best chance of improving the relationship between India and Canada rests in the hands not of any of the contenders for the Liberal Party leadership, but in the hands of the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, quite rightly, as by far the leading contender to be the next Prime Minister. So that, it's unkind, but I'm going to say it, that it's probably irrelevant who wins the Liberal Party leadership in terms of improving relations with any other country, and especially the particularly difficult relations that we have now between Canada and India. Having said that, I don't think there's a significant difference between the candidates on the issue of India, Khalistan, the Nijjar assassination, and so forth, because it's a huge issue, of course, for India, but for the voters of Canada, it's an also-ran issue. It's at the bottom of the list. Restoring relations with India is not the most important thing on the voters' minds going into the next election in Canada. And they are, as I say, most likely not to pick any Liberal to lead the country. And that does suggest, finally, that yes, there may indeed be some improvement in relations, because how do they get worse? It can only get better, really, under a Conservative Prime Minister, although I don't personally believe that a Conservative Prime Minister will act very differently. Cosmetically, yeah, there'll be nicer work. There'll be less tension between the two Prime Ministers, Narendra Modi, and whoever it is. But I don't think substantively they'll act differently with respect to the conduct of the Nijjar investigation.
Okay. So, of course, it may not be an election issue. All electorates vote on basic bread and butter issues, and Canadians are no different, especially when they are facing record high levels of food inflation and record high levels of unemployment and housing costs and so on and so forth. So it may not be an election issue, but this is also about repairing some of the damage. Bilateral relations are important. India has actually improved its relationship with all G7 countries, all developed countries, barring Canada. And Brahma Chellaney, let me ask you this, that how do you see that now relationship undergoing a positive change now that Trudeau is set to demit office? Or do you think so?
Positive change will take a while. First, whoever succeeds Trudeau as the Liberal Party leader is not going to fundamentally change course on India. But there is a more fundamental issue which we tend to gloss over, which is that for several decades now, as the Kanishka bombing underscored, that Canada has become the global epicenter of Khalistan militancy. That problem predated the arrival of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. His exit will not make material difference to that issue. It is true that Justin Trudeau sought to pander to Khalistan militants, especially because he was reliant on the support of Jagmeet Singh, who leads a smaller party in the Canadian Parliament. But the fact is that the course of the relationship between Canada and India also depends a lot on India, because after the Air India bombing occurred, India exerted no pressure on Canada to bring to justice the perpetrators of that bombing. successive governments in India exerted no pressure on Canada. As a result, Canada became the global hub of Khalistan militancy. Today, if there's a change of government, especially if the Conservatives take over
Yes.
the reins of government, and India exerts no pressure on Canada to come clean, to stop providing shelter and refuge to Khalistan militants who are openly using Canadian soil to make terrorist threats against India. If India exerts no pressure, then this problem will continue. We will only kick the ball down the road.
Let's take that to Terry, which is a very important point of Canada-India relationship, which is the anti-India rhetoric. It's grown. There have been very personal, rabid remarks, and one gets the sense that it's actually a sanctuary when it comes to harboring anti-India elements. And how do we address that issue? Because that's really the core of the issue, isn't it, Terry?
Yes, there's no question that there is a real problem with the Canadian attitude and their lack of urgency in dealing with the threat, and their lack of ability at the outset to even appreciate that there was a threat. I mean, when Gaurie asked Trudeau, Justin's father, for the extradition of the man who soon later became the mastermind of the Air India, the Kanishka bomb plot, Trudeau Senior said no. No, didn't want to interfere, didn't want to get involved, didn't want to pick sides, wanted to have his hands off. That attitude prevailed in the years that followed. The investigation of the bombing, of course, was completely botched. The trial was a fiasco, and only one man ever went to prison for this. Now, having said all of that, there is the present problem. What you're referring to is the way that Palestinians seem to be free in Canada, say whatever they like. No holds barred. The freedom of speech has been extended in Canada, not just to allow people to go down the street waving a flag and saying Palestine Zindabad, which is freedom of speech, nobody's hurt, that's okay. But to go beyond that and glorify terrorists, like putting the Baisakhi parade floats with great big posters of Dalvinder Parmar, the Air India bomber, celebrating his glorious career as though he's some sort of hero, that is inciting hatred, that is encouraging terrorism. That should be against the law, and it isn't. And I don't think India has done a particularly effective job lobbying Canada to explain the difference between inciting terrorism, inciting hatred, and regular freedom of speech, which threatens nobody. And the Indians need to, I think, fine-tune their approach. Say, look, there's some things we will tolerate, but we're not going to tolerate a truck going through a city in Ontario. It happened last year with a life-size diorama celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. For the country which you don't see people in New York parading pictures of Osama bin Laden through New York. I mean,
Exactly.
Come on. So the Canadians have a responsibility to address that issue, and they've ducked it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, this brings me to the other question I want to ask both the panelists. Let me start with you, Mr. Chellaney, which is the Sikh vote. And, you know, while there is a 2% Sikh population, it is the Khalistanis who seem to dominate their entire discourse. With an election round the corner, all parties will woo the Sikh vote once again. How do you see that likely to impact the overall relationship between India and Canada, given that harboring Khalistanis is pretty much at the core of that relationship?
It's a good question. First, Canada is home to the world's largest Sikh diaspora. Unfortunately, the Khalistan elements among the Sikh diaspora have organized themselves in such a way that they are using Canada's political system in a very effective manner, because the Canadian political system is not based on holding of primaries. Candidates are chosen by parties, not through primaries, but through meetings that are held in, let's say, a convention center in a district
Yes.
where maybe 200, 300 people might attend, and those who organize themselves very well
Yes.
are able to get their candidate nominated as the party's candidate.
Okay.
And the Khalistanis have understood how to exploit the system in Canada, and they have had undue influence in Canadian politics because of
Indeed.
their organizational skills.
Indeed. And quickly, Terry, let me ask you the same question, which is about wooing the Sikh vote. All parties will go all out on that.
Yes, and I think that there's another, again, I'm sorry to harp on India's mistakes instead of Canada's, but India's tended to overlook the fact that the other party, it's not just the Liberals, it's not just Trudeau, the other parties in Canada, also succumb to this temptation. Well, you know, they're promising to give me 2,000 votes in the local Gurdwara if I sing their song and I don't make any fuss about the glorification of terrorism, for example. So I think, yeah, I'd rather have the vote. I think I'll just keep my mouth shut when these parades go by at Vaisakhi time. So I do think that all parties have been guilty of pandering to this voting bloc, but let's not exaggerate it. That's the mistake that Canadian politicians make. They think that it's decisive. They think it all depends on the Khalistani vote, notwithstanding that, in fact, they need to wake up and realize that it's a tiny minority.
Yes. They are a minority, but an important minority because it's a vote that votes in mass. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Terry Milewski as well as Brahma Chellaney for joining me on this discussion.